And now, ladies and gentlemen, we present America's young singing star, the fabulous Charlie Gracie.
Well, talk to me, baby, whisper in my ear. Well, talk to me, baby, whisper in my ear. Won't you come a little closer?
And the guest tonight on the Record Collectors program is truly one of the founding fathers of rock and roll music. Way back in 1957, he was the second visitor to these shores from the United States, the home of rock and roll. First, of course, was Bill Haley. Now, those of you that really know your rock and roll, you know the second man that graced the stage in this country wasn't Buddy Holly. It was, of course, Charlie Gracie, our guest tonight on the program. Charlie, welcome back to the old country, England. Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's nice to be back here at my favorite place on earth, next to my own hometown, Britain. My favorite place, favorite people, and greatest rock and roll fans in the world.
Can we talk a little bit about your early career? Because you started off on Cameo Records in the States, where you had your early hits, which came out on, I think, Parlophone Records in the United Kingdom.
You're correct, but let me just say this, that I didn't begin my career with Cameo Records. I started with a little company called Cadillac Records originally, and I recorded for Cadillac from 1952 to about 1954, with no great success, but local popularity, starting to build up my name in the business. And then I recorded for a company called 20th Century for another year and a half or so, almost 2 years. And then finally, late 1956, I was approached by the owner of Cameo Records, which was a small, independent, unknown company. And we had the first major hit on the label. And of course, we had 3 other top 20 hits beside Butterfly, 99 Ways Fabulous in the States. But here in Britain, we had over 5 hits in the top 20. So I had greater success here than I had in my own home.
Your recording started in 1952, so you weren't at the beginning. You were at the very start of pop music.
Well, I was playing rock and roll, if I may say this, in modesty, before the phrase was coined, rock and roll. Unbeknownst to me, I was playing it, but we didn't know what to call it. So those of us young boys from my era and from the part of the country that I lived in, as the story goes, we used to listen to a lot of black music, the rhythm and blues stuff.
Do what music?
Very good, Michael. You know what you're talking about, pal. It's great. You're correct. Why they call it race records, I don't know, but they did. And growing up in my teens, we listened to a lot of that music. And of course, right after living during the period of the Second World War, though I was a child, the swing era was just coming to an end, 45, 46, 47. And also, we listened to some country music. So by putting the 3 together, the conglomeration, I think, added to what is now called rock and roll. It was a little bit of the swing, a little bit of the rhythm and blues, and a little bit of the country, and thereby rockabilly, you see.
When you were you were obviously very, very young at that stage.
Of course, Michael.
Who were you talking to and getting the ideas from? Because there was really nowhere to go for. There may be a few records on Sun and a few independent labels and the race records. But when you got your guitar out and started to play, were there any other bands around that you could mix with, or did you feel very isolated?
Well, no, in my particular instance, I always worked alone. I never worked with any band until later in my career. I formed my own little group. But I guess it's difficult to answer that question without trying to sound like...
Tell the truth.
Well, it's difficult to answer that question. But let me say this, that I really didn't have anybody to emulate. I guess, those of us that started at that particular time were all doing our own thing, unbeknownst to each other. And when rock and roll was finally formed, we were right there in the beginning. We were, I guess the bottom of the pyramid, the foundation, Now, some of us got more credit than others, and some got no credit at all. But I guess I fall somewhere in that category, and hopefully I added to some pioneering spirit of that music.
Let's play one of your hits at this stage of the program, Charlie. Let's pick from the Cameo recordings a track that I can play now. I've got in front of me my original I'm sorry to say it's not mint, guys, but it's the fabulous Charlie Gracie that's a Parlophone recording. I've got a GEP 8630. If I had a mint copy, we were £25 to £30, about $60. And this one's worth probably about $40 because the state is in about £20. Pick me a track of there, Charlie, and I'll give it a spin now.
Why don't we do one of the bigger songs of mine here in Britain called Fabulous? Would you like to do that one?
We will, and here is Fabulous.
Well, I always knew well, it's fabulous.
And that was Fabulous by Charlie Gracie, a big hit in Britain, of course, and taken from the EP, The Fabulous Charlie Gracie. Can we move on a little bit now from that time? Have you any memories of the rock and roll artists that you rubbed shoulders with? I mean, you were there with just about everybody who is now, many of them long gone, regretfully. There's an image of rock and roll stars that they're very sort of like rough and ready and hard characters and so on. I mean, the Gene Vincents of this world, the Eddie Cochrans, even perhaps some might say, Presley in some ways as well. What were your feelings towards the guys that used to travel and do the road shows throughout America? What kind of camaraderie was amongst you all? And what made these people tick?
Well, you got to remember one thing, Michael, that most of us were just young boys. While we're hearing Bill Haley in the background, who was the father of rock and roll, unlike us, Bill was already in his manhood. You see, when we were like 18 or 19, Bill was perhaps 29 or 30 years old. So in his case, it was a different position to be in. We were all kids, and most of the guys really had no show business experience. I think in my case, I had a little edge on them because I had already been performing in nightclubs since I was 16 years old. So consequently, by the time I was 21, I would say basically almost a seasoned professional. I had 5-6 years under my belt.
You were a TV show with Paul Whiteman and an outright winner 5 times in a row. How old were you then?
Right. Well, I got my start doing the Paul Whiteman show. Of course, for those folks who never heard of me, he was one of the premier orchestra leaders of the old days, the 40s and into the 50s. Then he had a television show.
Like a little bit of legacy from that, weren't they?
Yeah. I never did the Dorsey shows, but I did the Ed Sullivan show, which was the pinnacle of show business at that time. 60 million viewing audience at that particular time. It was the highlight of the week, and the show came on every Sunday night, I believe around 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Family show, variety. The night I was on, we had a famous athlete by the name of Wilt Chamberlain, who was a famous basketball player, and Henry Fonda, the movie actor, Don Amici, Ben Blue. I mean, could you imagine a little kid like me from South Philadelphia on with these stars? I was in awe. That's the only time in my life I was ever scared, as a matter of fact. I got dry mouth and my knees start shaking. And the guy said to me, 5 minutes, Mr. Grace. He said, there's 60 million people out there waiting for you. As soon as you said that, I was dead. But I went out and I did the show.
What song did you perform there? Do you remember?
I performed Butterfly at that time. It was the #1 record in America. It was #1 on the charts in the month of March 1957. But to get back to your original question, most of the guys I performed with, and you mentioned Eddie Cochran, who was my closest friend. He was at my home many, many times. And we'd sit behind the dressing room, and Eddie would ask me, Charlie, show me some licks on the guitar, because he was basically a rhythm guitarist, and I played both rhythm and lead. And I loved Eddie. He was my pal. And when he died, unfortunately, accidentally, it was like a void in my life for quite a long time.
How big a talent do you think he was? I mean, with the benefit of hindsight. I mean, obviously very, very young, a lot more in front of him. But I mean, creatively, how big a talent do you think he was?
Well, I think if he had lived, I think he would have been a great superstar eventually. It was a question of time with him. Of course, we were all bucking Elvis Presley, who was the king, and it was pretty tough to dethrone somebody like that. But a few of us in our career, for instance myself, for at least a 4-week period, dethroned Elvis. I became #1 for 4 weeks, and then he went to Las Vegas, and I went to a place called Wildwood, New Jersey.
Well, Elvis didn't do too well in Las Vegas, did he? I mean, that was... that's why he didn't go back for many years after that visit to Las Vegas. Do you ever meet Presley or not?
No, I never met Elvis Presley, but in my opinion, I think his manager really turned Elvis from a rocker into a monolith that nobody could touch anymore. He changed his style. They fixed his features physically. had nose work done, lip work done, eyes work done. It's not the same kid that started out. He was handsome, but they made him handsomer.
Is that a fact? Can you? I mean,
All you have to do is look at Love Me Tender, his first film, and then look at the ones that came after that, and you can see a different face. You see? Nobody ever seems to realize that. I guess they're so in awe of the saint that was created. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. He created a monster, and the monster destroyed himself. Isn't that terrible? I don't mean that in a demeaning sense, and I mean that out of love. I think the manager was the worst thing that could have happened to Elvis. It seems like nobody loved Elvis except his mom. If you read his career and got deep into it, and I think the poor guy was really a lonely guy. And if there was somebody there that could have put his arm around him and said, I really love you for what you are. Let me help you. I think he would have still been alive today.
Who was your favourite? Who treading the boards at that time? Who did you particularly like? You must have had one or two favourites that you were on tour with. You mentioned Bobby Darin earlier, because I was a great fan of Bobby Darin and his sort of style of singing, which he could almost sing anything. He'd almost do Ray Charles better than Ray Charles, and he could turn around, he could do swing, he could sing like Frank Sinatra. Next minute, he could rock and roll with the best of them. He just had a tremendous capability as an artist. But anybody else?
Well, Joe Turner was one of my favourites. Big Joe Turner. I grew up, loving Joe Turner. Especially he wrote Shake, Rattle, and Roll,
Wow, that is a record.
Yeah, I love it. Great song. As a matter of fact, we'll be doing that as a finale.
Say what you like. I mean, I'll play that. I've got the original record here. I'll give that. If you'd like me to spin that for you, I can spin that. Joe Turner, showing off. That's a £250 of record here. $500 record.
Yeah, he was a great artist. Of course, I didn't try to emulate anybody. I always thought I had my own style, and I believe that an entertainer should be unique and have his own style and not copy anybody, because you're only a copy, aren't you? Yeah. And of course, you mentioned earlier, Michael, about the shows. Let me just tell you one show we did, for instance. I was working at the Brooklyn Paramount New York Theater. Alan Freed was the host, put the show together, #1 disc jockey in America. And for instance, the show took place, and these are just some of the artists that worked the show. I headlined that particular Easter show in 1957. There was my friend Buddy Knox, Jimmy Bowen, the Everly Brothers, Bo Diddley, the Vikings, Brenda Lee. I mean, this is all one show for like a quid or a pound, I should say. Yeah, a couple of bucks. And you saw a movie beside. I think it starred Earl Flynn in the movie.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and we had like 3,000 or 4,000 people per show, and we did 2 a day, 7 days a week. But we were all having fun. We'd have done it for nothing. You see what I'm saying? We love what we did. At least I think most of us did. And there was no drugs. There was no politics involved. There was no booze involved. We were young kids, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. We were just happy to be there rather than be working at some hamburger joint, for $2 an hour. We were making perhaps $700 or $1,000 a week. That was a lot of money in those days.
Can we pick another record at this stage from? I'll dive back into my EP here that you'd like to play. Just so this is the kind of music you'd be playing at this period.
Why don't we do Just Looking? That's a foot tapper.
Okay, then a track called Just Looking. This is track 2 from side 1 of the fabulous Charlie Gracie EP. I'll be looking also at the Stockton Globe album, which was a pretty rare album a little later in the programme. But let's hear this one. Get your toes tapping.
I'm only looking, I don't want to play. Well, baby, that's all. That's all, baby.
That was Charlie Gracie and Just Looking. And we're just looking at the career of the great rocker himself here touring the United Kingdom. Looking a little bit ahead, Charlie, I gather that you're going to be touring in the UK with Tommy Sands in the spring.
Well, as a matter of fact, I neglected to mention Tommy was on the show, too. He's a great chap, and I haven't seen him in many years. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be late May, early June for about a week or 10 days, something like that. So this should be a nice reunion.
Your recordings in the States, is there anything that you recorded at Cameo or prior to Cameo that is still unreleased, or any outtakes or any rarities? There have been various LPs put out. Roller Coaster here had those you live on the stage at the Stockton Globe. You've probably seen that album anyway. Which, I mean, after all these years, considering it's the primitive recording, stands up extremely well. The Guitar Boogie, the instrumental in that's a cracking track. I played that the other week. That is because it means you know your way up and down the fret of that guitar of yours. There. What kind of guitar were you using?
I've been using a Guild X350 for the last 32, 33, 34 years, something like that. And I have a couple of them home, and I would play nothing else. That's my favorite instrument. It's a full-bodied guitar, by the way, with a triple pickup, which is nice. And it makes it easy to change intonations without turning a lot of buttons.
Your career ran about 57, 58. I mean, you were really almost in both sides of the Atlantic. You could do no wrong. I mean, you had, 4 or 5 very big million-selling records, and then it seemed to sort of like we had rock and roll was still alive and well. I mean, Jerry Lee Lewis was doing well, Elvis Presley was doing well, the Everly Brothers were doing well, and so on. And then we had things like records that on this country that came out, things like Crazy Girl, Pretty Baby, Doodlebug, The Angel of Love, which came out on Coral, which didn't have the same amount of registered sales. You think it was the material, the management, or why?
I'll tell you exactly why, if I may, okay? After recording with Cameo for those years, 57, 58, where we had our greatest success, we had a falling out. And in those days, most of us artists hardly ever got paid for our performances on record. I would say, honestly, we were all cheated. And some guys got absolutely nothing. So I decided, along with my colleagues at the time, that we were going to demand our money from the company. And what we did was we settled out of court for a certain amount of money, which I won't go into, and never really got full receipt for what we feel we deserved. After all, I sold 3.5 million copies of Butterfly and never got paid for that amount. Just imagine Fabulous, 99 Ways, and Wandering Eyes, I Love You So Much It Hurts, and so on and so forth. Now, if you add all that up, it comes to perhaps maybe £500,000 that I never received. But that's okay, fine.
$1 million, in fact.
Well, okay, fine. So I never received it, so I went on to other companies like Decca and Coral and Roulette and so on and so forth. But unbeknownst to me, when I sued the company, I sued a silent partner who shall go nameless, who was a very powerful man in the music industry. And when I did that, I cut my own throat, not meaning to do it, but I could never get my records played anymore after that. So consequently, my popularity diminished, and I sort of fell out of favor with the royalty of the music business. That's the true story.
I mean, Alan Freed died a pauper, didn't he? I mean, died eventually. I mean, was it? I mean,
well, it wasn't Alan Freed, okay?
No.
Alan Freed was a nice man.
But Tin Pan Alley, as a lot of people used to call the business in those days, Tin Pan Alley, was a very, very small group of people that controlled it, wasn't it?
I'm afraid so. And consequently, when a small group of people hold power, it's considered a dictatorship, whether it's in politics or whether it's in music.
Can I ask you now a different question? What's your favourite record that you've not recorded? That one of your favourite rock and roll records that you said that was a good record and you wish you'd actually laid it down as a track? Is there anything that you listen to and it still gets your foot tapping? Anything comes to mind that you like?
About 200 of them.
Oh, we got the time. We got the time.
I don't have one favourite. I have about 200.
Well, pick a track.
Well, I would have loved to have done perhaps Buddy Holly's big hit. Oh Boy, I love the song. That'll Be the Day.
Have you ever recorded that?
No, but I perform them live in my performances. Of course, on the tours that I do when I come to Britain, I do my hits. People want to hear my hits. But back home, when I perform throughout the States, rather than do the same music all the time, I try to do a little bit of everybody else's too for my era.
I got to say, your time is phenomenal here.
Because
as we actually talk about these artists, the records come on behind us here. So, but we will actually play. We will play that track for you. We'll dedicate it for
Michael. I like things like Thurston Harris. I like things like Bobby Day. I like things like Johnny Rivers, like Frankie Ford. All the Everly Brothers, Bobby Darin, and I can go on and on. I do all their songs, and when some of those folks were alive, they did my songs. We liked each other's stuff.
Let's hear a bit of Buddy Holly. This is a special request, and this is for you, Charlie, from all your fans in England. Here is Buddy and the Crickets. That was Buddy Holly and the Crickets. We're talking to Charlie Gracie on his current UK tour. This to those of you who maybe just joined the programme. If you've missed tracks like Butterfly, Fabulous, Wandering Eyes, Cool Baby, Crazy Girl, Doodlebug, and the other tracks of Charlie Gracie, then it's your loss, I can tell you. Charlie Gracie is back in the United Kingdom this spring, touring with Tommy Sands. So those of you who've got eagle eyes, better look out for tour dates in the music magazines, and hopefully the tour manager will let me know the dates when he's appearing so we can mention it to you on this programme. Charlie, can we talk about the 70s and so forth? And we can move on a little bit, move on from the 50s and 60s. Well, I mean, were you still performing in that period, or were you still touring in the States, or had the music changed? Were you performing other kinds of records, or who were you recording for, and where were you performing?
Right. Well, let me just say this here, that I've been an entertainer ever since I've been 10 years old, and I've been active in the business up till we're talking today, 1991. I've only been in show business. I've never had what we call a day gig. I've always been a show person, and that's how I've made my living, and I've always performed constantly. Consequently, I have no other income, so that's why I make my living, and I've managed to survive all these years, and I'm back in England again, as you know, and I work in the United States just about 40 to 45 weeks a year, steady for the past 34, 35 years, never out of work. Of course, when you're hot, you're hot. When you're not, you make a living. And I've been going along, making a living, taking care of my wife and children all these years, and we've had a good life. And
are you children in the business or not?
No, our children are not in the business. I say our children, my wife and I.
What are your children called?
Well, my son is Charlie Jr. My boy is in the clergy. He's studying for the priesthood in the Roman Catholic Church. My daughter Angela works for one of the large supermarket chains in our area. My boy's 32 years old. My daughter's 29. And we've been very fortunate. We have two very responsible and lovely children. And we've had a happy marriage. And, what more can a man ask for?
I've got in front of me an album that came out 2 or 3 years ago on Roller Coaster Records. Charlie Gracie, live at the Stockton Globe in 1957. Have you any memories of that gig? That's you're probably surprised that ever came out, but somebody recorded it and they pushed it out.
I'll tell you what happened, Mike, quickly. There was a gentleman that was working for the theater at that time. His name escapes me at the moment. I believe the man has passed on recently. And what he did was he recorded both shows on a little tape recorder, and after the show, he presented me with this tape as a gift, and I kept it in my home for many, many years. One day I get a call from John Beecher, who was the president of Roller Coaster Records, and asked me if I would be willing to have that put on an album, because it's so rare to have anything recorded from that period. And as you know, there was a pit band used in that orchestra, which is very difficult to play rock and roll. But it came off very well, and we have a collector's album today, which I think is very rare.
Well, of course, it's an extremely rare LP, and frankly, it's a pleasure to actually find something that's that old with such good sound quality. Incidentally, for those of you that may not know, the owner of the theatre also did it for Buddy Holly and gave a tape to Buddy Holly. But
really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
And no one's ever located the tape.
Oh, that's a crime. That's a crime.
Can you pick a track of this because I know you're due on stage, Charlie? Pick a track off the Stockton Globe album, and I can give it a spin.
How about if we do? Everybody seems to be excited about Guitar Boogie when I play it. How about if we play Guitar Boogie?
Certainly, Charlie. From all your fans here in the United Kingdom, come back soon. Tour dates coming up soon for the Tommy Sands tour with Charlie Gracie. And here is the man and the Guitar Boogie. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks for having me on the show, Michael.